Fighting Feral Druids is definitely no joke. Honestly, these duels were some of the hardest encounters I've ever faced during this whole expansion, excluding fighting a good hunter, of course. So you're really going to need to practice your speed, kiting skills, and control maneuvers to actually execute the kill. And you really need to keep up your uptime during the duel, because if you make one or two mistakes, you will eventually fall behind and ultimately lose the duel. The pussycat I fought in this video is named Suchi. He is currently the highest rated feral on the US ladders. And since this is the first time that I actually fought a feral in a long time, a good feral, I actually had to change out my playstyle in order to actually kill him. And so this took a little bit of practice for me to actually get to win a duel. I've only won about 20% of the duels, which is fairly a low percentage, but fire mages definitely have a hard time beating ferals in general. So I was pretty happy with 20%, especially since he's the highest rated feral right now. So as for my talents, like I said, I really had to change things up a lot. So instead of taking Presence of Mind, I took Blazing Speed. Blazing Speed is really good for kiting, and especially since Druids have so many gap closers, it's really good to have both Blink and Blazing Speed to, try to stay away from the enemy. The thing about Druids is, even if they get a little bit of uptime on you and get some bleeds on you, you really fall behind in the duel, so try to use these abilities to kite them as much as you can. Next up, instead of taking Temporal Shield, I took Ice Barrier. Temporal Shield is really good for burst, or taking burst I should say. It's kind of self-explanatory. It lasts for 4 seconds, and if you pop it before the burst comes, it's really good. But for ferals, they actually do, instead of burst, they do have a lot more consistent damage with their bleeds. So Ice Barrier really comes in handy for that. And trying to keep it up at all times and reapplying it every time it's ready is going to really save you. Next up, instead of Frost Jaw, I take Ring of Frost. I really love Frost Jaw. It's really good because I like to use it to defreeze enemies from range, because normally you have to Frost Nova them to deep. But the thing about ferals is any roots that you have for them, they can just shift it. So any roots will be useless against ferals, so you really need to take Ring of Frost to CC them. That's like your only real CC you have for them. Ring of Frost does DR with Polymorph, but you can't even cheat ferals anyways, so Ring of Frost is definitely the superior choice here. As for glyphs, the first one I like to take is Glyph of Deep Freeze. This glyph is mandatory for fire mages in general, but especially versus ferals, like I said before, novas are useless for some because they'll just shapeshift it. But what this glyph does is it takes deep freeze off of a global cooldown, so if you nova them, you can deep freeze them at the same time. It does have like a 0.5 second delay, but if you spam it, there's a high chance you'll actually land the deep freeze. The downside of this glyph is that you actually lose a second off of your deep freeze duration, but think about it this way. Without the glyph, it takes 1 second to actually get the defreeze off, which means you'll only have 4 seconds to actually do damage to the defreeze. And if you take the glyph, the defreeze can be used instantly without waiting a second, but then the duration is cut down by a second. So overall, in the end, you're only going to get 4 seconds to damage into it anyways, if that makes sense. And also, it's better to land the defreeze than to not land it at all, right? As for the next one, I replaced my Glyph of Polymorph for Glyph of Armors. The thing is, you can't poly Druids like I said earlier, so this glyph is pretty much useless unless you can catch him in a stun and poly out of it. So it's much better to go the guaranteed way and take Glyph of Armors for 10% less melee damage. For the last one, instead of Glyph of Ice Block, I like to take Glyph of Evocation. Glyph of Ice Block, the extra Nova from it is really good, but once again the feral will just shapeshift it, so having the extra heals from Evocation Glyph will be very helpful. So now that you know the basic setup that I like to use versus ferals, we're going to go over some of the concepts of ferals that you should know before hopping into a fight with a good one. So first, with their defensives, they have an ability called Barkskin, which reduces damage by 20% for 12 seconds, and they can actually use this while deep frozen, which really messes us up because we're all about scoring kills while they're deeped, and if they pop this on the first deep, which reduces 20% damage, it really does stop us from, trying to get them low. And also they can take a glyph that reduces crit chance by 25% as well, which is huge because as a fire mage we're all about crit, and the more we crit, the more procs we get, and the more procs we get, the more damage we do, and without the crits we're nothing. So if they do use this glyph, it really does mess us up and stops us from doing our job. Next is Might of Ursoc, which increases maximum health by 30%. It's kind of similar to the Warrior's Rallying Cry ability. Last is Survival Instincts, which reduces damage taken by 50% for 12 seconds, which is also huge. During this time, you just want to kite as much as you can, or maybe CC them with Breath Ring. So in the dueling video, a lot of people were mentioning how the Druid wasn't using Heart of the Wild. Instead, he was actually using Nature's Vigil, and what it does is it increases damage and healing done by 12% for 30 seconds, which allows him to go both offensive and play defensive at the same time. This plus the Glyph of Ferocious Bite, which heals him every time he uses it, really gave me a hard time trying to kill him. Plus the procs you get and the actual healing touch heals with the instants, it really made it hard for me to actually finish him off. And I asked him why he used Nature's Vigil, and he said he preferred it versus Fire Mages because it's a shorter cooldown and it just keeps his playstyle more consistent, if that makes sense. As for the offensive abilities of the Feral, just keep an eye on Tiger's Fury and Berserk. These two abilities will increase their damage and also increase their energy efficiency. But most importantly, just keep an eye on how many bleeds you have, as that will determine whether or not you should block most of the time. So all these abilities just make it terrifyingly hard to beat a good Feral. Like, killing them is hard enough, but trying to survive while going through everything, plus Trinket, is just a nightmare. You have to play perfectly and rotate your defenses really well while going through their defensives, and then try to kill them off once they have nothing. So now that you know what my thought process is, and you also know what a Feral can do to me, I'm going to commentate a duel and let you in on my thought process. So in this commentary, I will let you know my situational awareness and let you know what are the best ways to counteract the Feral's actions. So as usual, he's going to pounce me in the beginning. I'm going to instantly blink it and then Inferno Blast. I Inferno Blast first because I want to start up my heating up so I can get my Pyro Blast as soon as possible. I'm then going to Living Bomb him. He pops his Trent Root on me, he leaps over and instantly bashes me. And I normally didn't Trinket this initial bash because it was DR'd. I used to think, oh, it's just DR'd or whatever, I'll just save my Trinket for a later clone. But a good Feral won't even clone you. And what he does within this DR'd bash is he gets all his bleeds on you. So if you do sit this bash, that's when you start falling behind. And this was a huge mistake I made for the first few duels I had with Tsuchi. So instantly Trinket it, and you want to breath him into a ring right away. The reason I breath him into a ring instead of doing anything else is because you want to get your shorter cooldowns out of the way so you can get them up as soon as possible and use them again. Instead of, say, if you altered there instead, it'd be a longer cooldown and it'd be a waste because you could have breathed twice by then. So I'm going to ring the Feral. I'm going to Inferno Blast the Trent to get my hot streak instead of the Feral because he's in a ring. I don't want to break that. And I'm going to try to shatter the Druid, but I actually wasn't fast enough. The Living Bomb broke the Ring of Frost. So instead, I'm just going to pop my DPS Trinket, Nova him, and defreeze him. Chuck a couple Pyros in there, he Barkins it, and then he Trent Roots me, so I blink that into a Blazing Speed Kite. I reapply Living Bomb, and as you can see right here, I have full bleeds on me, so I'm just going to block them off. I like to block next after using Breath Ring, because then I can get my Hypothermia debuff going. That way, say if I block when I have nothing, and once I come out of block, what am I going to do? I'm just going to die. I won't be able to live long enough for the Hypothermia debuff to expire, which is 30 seconds. So he's Trinking, so I come out, lock that. My Pyro crits. I Dragon's Breath him, and since he's Breath, I'm going to try to cast a Fireball, but he Trinkets it. So I stop casting and I juke the Skull Bash. I Inferno Blast instead to get my proc, and as you can see right here at Altar, and this is a perfect time to Altar. See, I don't have many bleeds on me. I only have like one debuff. So I'm going to Altar with a Hot Streak. So this means the Altar is both offensive and defensive because I'm altering with a proc and I'm altering with no bleeds on me. So I'm going to chuck my Pyro, and normally I would sit the Altar, but since he's already low, I'm just going to Altar back, combust him and chuck my Pyro, Inferno Blast, and right here he pops some Ursoc to get some HP back. I'm trying to just finish him off right here, but he's living quite a while. I tried to Nova him, but he shapeshifts it. So I'm going to Blazing Speed, Incanta's Ward, Cold Snap for another Nova, DR defreeze him, chuck my Pyro. I then Dragon's Breath him, put him into a ring, and then once again I'm going to Inferno Blast the Trent instead of the Druid, and then Scourge Pyro Blast, Blanket Silence, Pyro again, and down he goes. So once again, to recap, you really want to use your shorter cooldowns first so you can get them back up again as soon as possible, so you can use your abilities as much as possible before the duel ends. And also try to block before Altar timing so you can use it both offensively and defensively while your Hypothermia debuff is up. Coordinate that with Blazing Speed and some Blink Kiting, and I can guarantee you a win versus Pussycat.
Woo!